We're at the home of Colonel Barry Turner today, and you've just seen a small portion of the amount of books in this home. We'll see some more in a moment. Colonel Barry Turner is very, very learned indeed. He's an expert in the field, as you can see from the books here how varied that is. Anything to do with fighting tyranny, the reasons behind tyranny, and we go from anything from the Bilderbergers, the Illuminati, struggles for world power, political correctness, and we've got monetary matters, money forums, and as you can see from these books, everything here that Colonel Barry Turner has to tell you can be verified and it's documented. You can look it up for yourselves and see that he's telling the truth. In this field of, I don't like to call it conspiracy theory, but it's understood what we mean by that. In this field there are so many false tales, disinformation, facts that are turned around, misunderstood. And I think you'll agree, after listening to Colonel Turner today, that we can get a real, true, actual, basic slant on just what's going on. Now, we were having a house party today, a very mixed selection of people, and we've got a lot of young people here also who've got a lot of questions to ask, and Colonel Turner is the man to ask. So we're going to go over in a moment, when we've just seen a few more of the books. And believe you me, this house is packed with books, and old books, learned books, very, very famous books, ones that are known for their accuracy, and he's read every page, I'm sure. So we're going to go over in a moment and join the house party and see what the guests here have to ask, have to talk over, and come and join us. And if you've got any questions, we'll give you some information. You'll see it on the side here, or we'll tell you where to get in touch if you want to know more. So we're just going to pop into the other room with books, and then we're going over to join them.
When you're looking at any situation such as those we're all involved in, it's like peeling away the layers of an onion. Different layers mean different things to different people. There are many ways of looking at it. If you consider, say, the destabilization of education, somebody at a very high level, somewhere in the system, at the top, has an agenda. It's not declared, it's not known generally, but they kick the ball into play. And the next thing you get are the experts, the civil servants, the specialists, devising syllabus changes or that sort of thing, examination system changes to meet this policy which is fed down through the system. Their agenda is exactly the job they're doing. Lower down the scale, people are just doing jobs quite honestly without any knowledge of the ultimate impact, the strategy, the grand strategy, because they're paid to. They have jobs, they have pensions, they have promotion prospects and all the rest of it. It comes down to the schools. The headmasters have a problem teaching it. They may protest, they may criticise these changes at, say, NUT, at the headmasters' conference levels, that sort of thing. But they're stuck with it. And then the teaching profession, of course, has to implement it, whether they like it or not. It's policy, but it starts somewhere where somebody has a specific agenda, and you finish up, of course, with all sorts of changes made in the education system, like the no-fail system. You know, a grade F is a pass, but it's a failure, but it's called a pass. You know, this sort of thing. So it depends where down the onion you're looking at a particular layer, and what its implications are, and you know who understands what is going on at their level. Now, maintaining the question of power, this is really what it's all about. It's the power, the exercise of power, the growing consolidation of power on a global basis, and the of course, central to that is control of money. And as one follows the course of these things, increasingly we are finding that things are being centralised. The recent crisis have given them another excuse to centralise. And it's an interesting study on its own. But we are slowly being enslaved by money, and we're being enslaved by the governmental administrative systems. And Brian Gerrish, of course, has been looking into common purpose with a view to producing a slave society in the end. Now, one of the quotes that I've used is one by Nicholas Murray Butler, because I studied Marxism, Leninism and communism under one of the few genuine experts in the country. And here we have, on the 19th of November 1937, the Fabian Nicholas Murray Butler addressed a banquet in London with the words, "Communism is the instrument with which the financial world can topple national governments and then erect a world government with a world police and world money." Now, if you think about that, and if you think about the Marxist system, the communist system, Soviet communist system, the S, the second S in USSR stood for Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, not the Union of Soviet Communist Republics. And there's a conterminous relationship between communism, Soviet communism, Marxism, and socialism. And what we're looking at in the case of Fabian socialism is something running in parallel with communism. They're interwoven, they're much the same thing applied in different ways. Now, George Knupfer, who was the son of a Soviet, Russian naval intelligence officer during the First World War period, has written a very good book, Struggle for World Power, in which we read about the deliberate disinformation about Russia and what the state of Russia. And we watched the battleship Potemkin the other night, and really, there you were. They had a fleet, somebody made it, they had engineering facilities, resources, steel production, they were the greatest grain exporters in the world, that sort of thing. All recorded. We were told it was a primitive slave society and so on and so forth. Money lay at the root of that. But he's very interesting on the relationship between socialism, communism, and money. Now, another quote is Disraeli. In Coningsby, he writes, "So you see, my dear Coningsby, that the world is governed by very different personages to what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes." This kind of statement was made by Rathenau, who was later assassinated, the 300 mysterious men who control what is going on. In a retirement speech, the chief of staff of the New York Times, in a toast in 1953, revealed what exactly was going on in the press. "We are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities and our lives are the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes." The press, 1953. Now, I don't need to tell people here the nature of the press, or the media, shall we say, as a whole. The present time. Cross ownership, the empire created by Rupert Murdoch has been allowed by governments. It happened, another link in the chain was legislation was severed during John Major's time about the press cuttings, where they relaxed the rules for cross-media ownership, and it's just grown from there. The people we elect to Parliament vote on these things, and this, of course, is where the machinery lies. They're the people we elected, or the people elect, and they're the people who have the vote. And until they're controlled, difficult to get anywhere. Now another quote, Bertrand Russell, The Impacts of Science Upon Society, Simon and Schuster, 1953. The key bit here is gradually, by selective breeding, the congenital differences between rulers and ruled will increase until they become almost different species. A revolt of the plebs would be as unthinkable as an organised insurrection of sheep against the practice of eating mutton. And that, of course, is what they're reducing society to through, in particular, political correctness. Now, in there's a book about political correctness. It's an American book, quite an old one, the Politically Correct Dictionary, I think it is, or handbook. Now, my mentor, who, as I say, was one of the few genuine professionals in the intelligence field who understood Marxism, Leninism, and so on, and what the objectives were in terms of the ideological struggle, which is what political correctness is all about. When I showed him the book and said it's quite amusing, you know, it's some funny stuff in here, he said, that is deadly serious stuff. That is no joke. Now, he knew what he was talking about. Now, this is, again, is the situation where, now, the last thing really is that there is a theme running through history, and it's taken from, really in modern times, from the creation of the Illuminati in 1776 under Adam Weishaupt and Baron Nig. Now, we've had secret societies through history, the Rosicrucians and Knights Templar and so on and so forth. And through the 19th century, we had a series of revolutions, we had a series of secret societies. One thing is certain, that revolutions do not start without money to finance them. Somebody puts the money in. And you had the decabrists, the Russian officers in the 1820s forming a revolutionary group. You had the Carbonari, the carbon burners of Italy and France, who had Masonic type lodges. And in the history I've got, there are diagrams, an engraving of a lodge, exactly like a Masonic lodge. You have Freemasonry itself, which a number of people don't understand, I can tell you, in its various variations, manifestations. But it is a confidential society. Masons are very difficult to you can't pit one Mason against another. For the most part, it's a very innocent calling. The blue masonry is a very flat pyramid, but within the top echelons and within certain echelons, of course, take local government level right up to top, it can work amongst a very few. But they will never open their books to non-Masons. I've seen it. But you come through the Fabian Society, the foundation of the Fabians, the first, second and third internationals, and Karl Marx, the attack on society to destroy religion, morality, tradition, culture, inheritance, very specific. Those were cries that came from the Illuminati. That's where it started. Liberty, equality, fraternity. And you'll find that in Abbé Barruel, published in 1798. Now, the Bolshevik Revolution took place shortly after the Menshevik takeover of government, March 1917, October 1917, and then we had Soviet communism. Now in 1922 was founded the Frankfurt School for Social Research, and their specific task has been to carry out the ideological struggle based on Marxist principles, destruction of culture, society, religion, inheritance, tradition, morality, and so on and so forth. And they work specifically since 1923. 4 men, Horkheimer, Adorno, Fromm, and Marcuse. They were involved in the student insurrections in the 60s, and they have produced, by what they call, of course, the march through the institutions. I think that was coined by Gramsci, or of Gramsci, the Italian communist. They have produced the mentality and the attitudes we have at the top today. And through the 30s, society changed radically. And we're in this position now where we have society being destabilized by, and people in high places either party to it or believing in it or carrying it out. Now, the continuity, why should there be a conspiracy? Why conspiracy theory? It's popular for journalists to rubbish conspiracy theory. The talking heads appear in the popular press. They don't have a clue, but they've got a job to do, a name to make. Conspiracy theory, instinctively rubbish it. But there is a conspiracy. If you go back to the turn of the 19th, 20th century, you also had the Boer, which was fabricated, conspiracy there. Milner, I think, was the High Commissioner, or Governor General or something. Lord Milner, or Sir Alfred Milner then, he came home to London, and General, help me out, Butler, Sir William Butler, was the Commander-in-Chief. So he was an important man. He was deputised, and he discovered that the Boer War was being fomented deliberately by certain influences. He presumably cabled London to Milner, and when Milner went back to South Africa, Butler was sacked. Milner then led to the Rhodes Group, financed by the Rothschilds and East European bankers, recorded in J.A. Hobson's The War in South Africa, its causes and effects. And then you had the Round Table, the creation of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, popularly known as Chatham House, a favourite of Roberts. And so it goes. Now, why is there a continuity? One might say, why quote the Illuminati as the root of all this? They're dead, they've gone. The Illuminati fizzled out and that was the end of that. Other revolutions, what have they got to do with the present day? What have they got to do with the Illuminati? In 1848, the revolutions planned to erupt simultaneously across Europe, and did. Why relate that to the Illuminati? New people were there, different causes. It wasn't. An analogy which interests me, it occurred to me in the bath where one tends to get the best ideas. Cricket. One I'd like to play on the Americans. It's good for their souls, I think. In fact, I think it was in my last broadcast with Stanley Monteith. You see, cricket started, I think, it was known as a bat and ball game of some sort in the Elizabethan time. Now, in probably the 17th, 18th century, you see pictures of men in frock coats and top hats. And I think they had 2 wickets then, that were distinctly, a cricket appearance, just about recognisable, and a bat would be more like a hockey stick. Now, we came through the 19th century, the age of W.G. Grace, and then we came into the 20th century, and it was gradually modernised until it's gone wholly commercial. They play short-term, 50-over cricket in pyjamas and things like that, and we have Packer, and they, instead of blazer and flannels, they wear bomber jackets with advertising slogans and baseball caps. It's still cricket. Now, the spirit of cricket began in history, but it's followed through, and it's kept its momentum. It's the same philosophy that infects people, the enthusiasm, you could call it. And cricket then is cricket today. Now, you don't say, well, they're dead, that wasn't cricket. We're the real cricketers, there's no connection. But you find this thread through conspiracy as you find the thread through the history of cricket. And I think that's where, that's where one can look for what really is conspiracy and what is influencing us today. And we're now into this age of centralization of power, centralization of money, the virtually unlimited creation of money, and one term which I find keeps coming back to mind, of the 1930s, is a statement by the Earl of Tankerville in, I think, 1934. Donald sells the Panthers, I know. Poverty and its plenty. So where are we going from there? We are in a situation, a collapsing economy. This nation is said to be prosperous. It's knee-deep in debts, I think $1 trillion plus individual debt. And wherever you look, people are living on tick. That's not prosperity. And when we have repossessions, subprime mortgages hitting the headlines, that isn't prosperity. But somebody's making money, because there's a huge amount of money swirling about the city, as everybody knows. And there are people who've got so much money they don't know what to spend it on. Both sides of the Atlantic. That money is being created, and debt is being layered on itself in ever increasing amounts. What I describe, it's purely my lay image of this, is like an upside down cone spinning in precarious equilibrium. And it don't stop, and every time it wobbles it's in danger of disintegrating completely. And if you read the Don McIlvaney newsletters, you'll see repeated references to the coming crash. And I set much store by McIlvaney. So there you are. We're in an age of conspiracy. We have many feeders into it. A lot of people have studied it. A lot of people, like Brian, are tackling elements of it. But you keep running up against a rubber wall when you try to, or a glass ceiling if you like to look at it that way, where you can't get any further. You can't penetrate the political scene. You can't get anybody to do anything about it. MPs, or the MP I wrote to, our local MP, does not want to know about the money question. You campaign and get his face in the paper, but he bounces off it. He won't square up to it. And when you look at what is going on, what you have is a level of society, a ruling elite of a type, which changes shape with political changes, but not significantly, where there is a them and us. The middle classes are a danger because they can think and they can wake up and they can talk, and there's a danger of that happening. If you can get them playing golf and so on, then you distract them and feed them rubbish in the papers they think are definitive papers and reliable. You're never told the truth. We're never told the truth. And this is a great problem we've got. But that society lives over and above the rest of it. It lives outside it. They're no different in that sense to the Soviet nomenclatura. And this great liberal egalitarian society has to have somebody to run it. And this you're never told, of course. It's all very well having democracy and so on and so forth, but somebody has to be in charge. And they're the people that are running it. And you look at these lists of names, and some you can identify as being in it, and others, however senior, however wealthy, are not part of it. They're just part of the system. I'll leave you with that thought. I've said enough. Anybody likes to come back or toss in any bombs or brickbats, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you, Barry.
At this level, 0 for 4 MP, we are worried about the onset and the undesirable influence of the European Union in our daily lives. Sorry. And we were, are you worried as 4 MPs? And well, they might say, yes, we are worried. And the next one, well, what the hell are you going to do about it? Well, there is a way of doing it. We got an MEP, have we not? Or MEPs. And say to these MEPs, you are our representatives. We've got our local MP on our side. It's your business, along with us, right, to ask the MEPs what they're doing there. What our problems are so and so. Problems with the public are so and so. What are you going to do about it? Now, I said at the start, I'm a practical historian, if you like. I mean, I put this forward to the meeting as something practical that we can do. So I leave that to you.
Anybody got any solution?
Well, it was a good idea, but the thing is, you actually got to get him to do it, haven't you? I mean,
well,
yeah.
Exactly.
Would they be willing to do it? That's the thing.
Exactly. Exactly. But I mean, it's a practical.
It's a practical thing, yeah. It is, yeah.
I think it's a much more important thing is to go and accuse them of treason, and to do what Albert Burgess is saying. You know, we've got to be more brutal, more directing our approach really. They know they're not doing the right things. They know they're not. They know all about this. They know all that's going on. They know it's wrong what they're doing. But we've got to say you're committing treason against our country and have the facts behind it to support that, and to all go together to police stations like Albert Burgess is saying, and to say that we want our MPs to be accused of treason.
That's fair enough. In my idea, practical idea, if we put that into the public domain, I'm a great believer in an administrative structure from the bottom up, in which you can try to get a group. I agree. The difficulty would be to get the MPs to think this way, and having got them to think this way, then to put pressure on the MEPs. But, well, there you are. I've said something.
Just saying, you've got a great opportunity on Wednesday to do just that. Next Wednesday. When we're all up in London and Westminster, to all shout treason at all the MPs.
Oh, he's not beyond. Sorry, go on.
You can actually on Wednesday, if you ring up your MP, book an appointment with him to actually say this to him directly. I've got an appointment with Sir John Butterfield at 3 o'clock in the what do you call it, chamber corridor,
central lobby.
Central lobby, yeah.
My other point is, if this idea does get home, I realize the enormous difficulty within it. If this idea gets out home, if it happens here, can't it happen in Birmingham? Can't it happen elsewhere?
Brilliant. A question for you all. Barry's given a summary of sort of people power events that are affecting us all. So there was a potted history of what's happening and some explanation of why it's happening. But if I say to you as a group, what is actually, in 2 or 3 words, what is happening in this country? What is actually happening in this country at the moment?
Destruction of democracy, about taking away of our freedoms and our liberties.
Well, anybody want to add to that?
It's a sort of a chemical change. It's like a chemical process to changing one substance into another.
Okay.
If the substance is society, it's been totally changed by these processes into its almost its opposite, or it's abnormal. The abnormal manipulation of society into something changing people. It's degrading society. It's reducing people to non-thinking robots. The manipulation.
Right, so we're talking about the destruction of society, we're talking about the deliberate change of society into something which you then qualify as robotic. Right, so what is actually happening to society?
Redistribution of wealth.
Sorry?
It's a takeover.
It's a takeover. That implies that you're changing from one state to a new state. What is the new state?
We're no longer
The European Union.
self-sufficient.
It's the European Union.
And what's behind it?
The
What is behind it?
New World Order.
Well, what's behind it is the multinationals and big finance. And in fact,
But we've
philosophically, philosophically, it's the same. It's the Soviet Union of Western Europe.
Right.
It's a step in the march towards world government.
It's communism taking
Total
over.
world government.
What you've done, because you're all right, is but you've all given different responses to the question. The closest you got was the destruction of democracy. You've given a change of state. You then go to the European Union. You've gone to the robotics. You've gone to the New World Order. So for people around us that we're trying to talk to, we are never going to convince them of anything because we keep hopping around in what the problem is. But the problem is very simple. This country is being destroyed. And the destruction and the change of state isn't to a new nice state. If you say it's going to go to a Soviet state, it's going to go to a proper Soviet state, which means that dissidents are going to be removed and murdered, because that's what they always do. So, to my mind, one of the big things is that if we want to get people changing and understanding what's happened, you have to repeat a message, and that message has got to be very simple to people. You are being attacked, you are being destroyed. And my interest with people is, I wonder, are there any people in this group who don't actually believe, well, perhaps I've got to do it the other way, do you believe these people are actually trying to kill us? Do you believe that?
No.
Who doesn't believe that?
I don't believe it.
You don't?
No, I think they're trying to control us. They can control us by killing some of us, but I think control is the objective.
So our disagreement is simply over the number they're going to kill. If the us is me, I'm beginning to feel a bit unhappy about this. If the us is you, then I shouldn't bother. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying you shouldn't bother. I just was. You asked if I agreed with your statement, and I said no, because I didn't agree with it as it stood.
Now, if we're all turned into robots, it's not required for them to kill us. We as robots, we serve a useful purpose. They don't want the destruction of the robots because they're needed. Whether the robots are not going to rebel, by definition, they're robots, so they don't need to be killed.
I was talking to Brian earlier about Ritalin. I can remember some 15 years ago, I think, the Phyllis Schlafly newsletter coming from America, which I had courtesy of Donald, as I do most of my material, was exposing the use of Ritalin for hyperactive children. Now, it was being prescribed in America, and I think it was being made compulsory at some stage. Now, the indications were that it would leach across the Atlantic to this country. Now, did we need it before? Why do we need it now? And bit by bit, you saw references in the press to the use of Ritalin in the United Kingdom. And I think now the use has become officially approved. Now, I spoke to somebody who had dealings with he was a 7-year-old boy who was hyperactive. She persuaded the parents to feed it proper food and not trash food, and the child began behaving normally. So there's a message there, the use of drugs to control people, and the fact that there was a huge commercial override in providing, manufacturing and selling the drug, like possibly fluoride in water.
Which has just been announced again.
They keep trying.
Isn't it just based on the basis of money that this is being done? That they're earning huge amounts of money.
Well, you take Pfizer. Pfizer introduced Viagra. It was promoted as an old man's sort of libido, is that the term? Sort of enhancer. Okay, fine. And I think the heart attacks kill 1 or 2 of them, which is hardly surprising, as a consequence, a side effect. But you see, the next time I looked in one of the glossy magazines, the sort of weekend type magazines, the advertisement for Viagra featured a clearly young couple, a rear view of a young couple. Viagra was moving into a bigger market, money. Now, where is the motivation? Is it total commercialism? Or is it a desire to cause positive harm? Now, if you look at the control and the destabilisation, 3 years ago, this coming July, I was diagnosed with dry age-related macular degeneration. Now, I worked on this, and I had a lot of help, very lucky. I had a chain of people involved, including my brother, who've had a lot of references, and I worked out a routine for containing and reversing it. Now, my eyesight after almost 3 years is to all intents and purposes normal. What I avoid certain things, like strong lights or driving at night, because eye rest is important. I take a range of supplements. I have a routine. It's you know, quite different diet and things like that. I decided I could have taken the line, you know, F you, Jack, you know, I'm okay, to the an attitude to other cases I heard, because once you're diagnosed, of course, the Bush telegraph works, and oh yes, we know somebody else. And I found a lot of them were getting either no medical advice at all or bad advice. And this is, of course, the GPs are not trained in this sort of thing for the most part. So I thought, right, I'll write a booklet. Why not? The booklets provided by Help the Aged provide a range of booklets on various problems. So I set to drafting this, and my GP was very interested. He's a very nice chap, and he's very good, and he was excellent during my bionic hip phase 5 years ago. But he was interested, and he asked me to give him a table of the supplements, and he said he'd like to see the draft, and so on and so forth. He was quite encouraging, without committing himself. So I sent the final draft, and I got that draft, and all my correspondence returned. A slightly embarrassed letter, I'm very sorry, but you know, we as a practice of the partnership can't afford to get involved in this sort of thing. I wish you luck, you know, and he sent me some BMJ papers on the subject. He also sent me a BMA letter, British Medical Association letter to GPs, advising them against, on the dangers of litigation. Now we are into a litigation-crazed society, and that was really what killed it, I think. Now at the same time, a McIlvaney newsletter arrived, and he had a big article on the determined suppression of natural health cures, vitamins, supplements and that sort of thing by the multinational corporations, the pharmaceutical industry, and this is purely political. And you could see the dangers both ways. They need us for profits. It wasn't that we need them any longer to cure us. We are required by big business, and their power is such. We have a government at the moment, after 10 years, which has betrayed us on a range of subjects, including GMOs. Huge tide of public resistance to GMOs. This government not only backed it, sold out to Monsanto and company, but they were betraying the electorate. Monsanto have a huge presence in Brussels, permanent presence. And this is where a lot of the influence lies, and this battle is going on in Brussels. In fact, the Austrian agriculture minister vetoed the introduction of GMOs in agriculture and then changed his mind at a meeting which was sponsored and dominated by Monsanto. And then he retired shortly afterwards. Fisher, yeah. You see, you're up against this as well. Control, power.
This is why
to what purpose?
They're trying to do away with the vitamin industry, aren't they?
No, that's it, exactly. This is what I'm talking about. Yeah.
To what purpose?
Can I come back to what you said? In a few words, how would you describe, and I would say, right, the conscious undermining the unconscious. I mean, you could start with that. If you wanted a slogan, you could start with that, because people say, well, what do you mean by that? I will tell you what you.
Well,
but I think, I don't want to dominate. And we are getting away from, what's this meeting about? Is the meeting about suggestions or things to do? Do we leave here and say X, Y, and Z, go and do so and so? Or talk about so and so?
Or
do we leave the meeting, go have a lunch, nice lunch, leave the meeting in mid-air, walk home and say, well, what have we done?
I'm here because I totally believe I'm watching my country being destroyed.
So am I.
And I totally believe that people destroying this country are totally ruthless.
Yes.
They are going to destroy whatever they want.
Yes, you've got a word of the media politician, you've got one Philip Green, 2 yachts in Can and so. Yeah, I mean, they all speak with the same voice. Yeah, and that's what we've got to be bothered about.
Right, but the effect on the ground is that people are being hurt. Whether it's people dying in dirty hospitals, or whether it's children committing suicide, or whether it's the effect of drugs. People are dying in this country as a direct result of what is being done to the country. And I know I've been naughty, I will shut up.
Okay.
But a fundamental thing
No.
of all the groups, when you go to a UKIP meeting or you go to any other open public meeting and you say to people what is going on, what they will do is come back with 1,001 different definitions of what's going on. But the answer is very simple. The country is being destroyed. So that is a message. And if you recognise it, then the solutions become much simpler. But if we talk 1 minute about, well, with respect, we're changing into a robotic state, or we're changing the state into a sort of EU thing, people around us are just confused. They don't know what we're talking about. Well, shut up.
Phil wants to say something.
It's not my meeting.
Phone, you're trying to get a point in.
Right, yeah, we're going back to the robotics and the destroying of people. And I just want to put a mention in for sustainable development. Because that's part of this is Robert's territory very much, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes. And the bringing the world numbers down.
Yes, there's an article the other day, wasn't there, about in the Mail where I forget the name of the organisation, they're saying that the sustainable population of Great Britain would be 17 million. I forget the name of the organisation that was saying that. And then Carnegie was saying in about 1900 that he thought that at that time we were at the absolute maximum that the British Isles could sustain. And I guess the population then, I'm not sure, I guess it was around 40 million then.
Can you just give us a quick rundown of what sustainable development is, where it came from? Because a lot of people never really heard of it here, have they?
No, it comes from well, it's a United Nations concept, isn't it? I'm sure that it's associated with United Nations. Maurice Strong, the Canadian billionaire, is very much part of the promotion of it, isn't he?
Yeah.
But it's promoted by soft law. It's creeping into every country by soft law, isn't it? Where you have United Nations recommendations rather than a hard law.
And it was set up by a summit, wasn't it, somewhere?
Was it? What was it? What was it? The Rio summit, was it?
Wasn't there around target on that, Donald, where the Rockefellers and company were involved? The fourth wilderness.
This is the use of countries being in financial debt and taking control of the national assets.
Yeah.
But the question of sustainable development is used as much as anything else to say, to look at the finite raw materials and resources and saying that any development that you have has got to be sustainable in the long term. That's the theme. And whether resources can be renewed. That's the theme which they take within this. But of course a lot of it is then used to those things which they don't like to tax or control out of existence by one means or another.
Isn't it right that they made a list of things that are not sustainable and those things have to go?
Well,
because we're seeing that now, aren't we? Like,
well, that's what they're seeking to do.
Lessening the population, not having asphalt, things like that, isn't it? And not having the mechanical farming, chemicals. It's quite a long list, isn't there?
Well, there's all sorts of things mixed into this. I don't think it's. I wouldn't put it as too much as a simplistic thing on its own, because it's a very broad economic thing. But coming back to your point, particularly on population, I mean, this country is certainly overcrowded, there's no doubt about that, but then you've got a deliberate policy of bringing lots of people, particularly under, again, the European Union, who can have as a right to come here, which they shouldn't have, and therefore you start to make this country unsustainable in that sense, particularly when you're running down agriculture, to take just one or take two, running down industry at the same time. But that's part of the destruction of the United Kingdom, which is a deliberate policy. But if you talk in terms of world population, then in terms of growing food, the number of barren areas, when I say barren, areas which are not cultivated in the world can be sustained, but there is also a policy to make sure that plenty of them aren't sustained. I mean, even in this country, look at now a lot of land, not just on the question of rotation and some fields laying fallow, which used to be a sensible farming approach, but now deliberately taking large areas of land out of production, so that at the moment, if we suddenly had a crisis, we're not capable of feeding ourselves or anywhere near.
60% of our food now,
and that makes us more easily controlled. It's part of the subversion and takeover.
Centralisation.
And centralisation.
Food retailing.
And food centralisation.
Transport ceasing to run, so inner cities starve. In the ultimate.
Biofuels.
Biofuels, yeah. Biofuels, they're taking lots of land that was used for growing food and then growing biofuel on it.
Right.
That's putting the price of
grain
well, it's bad enough in this country, but imagine the effect of that on very poor countries, on Africa, on maybe somewhere like Mexico, or that's a serious thing, and I think there's a big agenda behind that.
Pick another layer of the onion, peel another layer of the onion away. Carbon limits. Now, setting limits to carbon emissions and so on in industry. The next thing you see in the Financial Times is money to be made out of it, carbon trading. And here we go again. Big money sees that particular aspect as something financial. Now, there's no concern for the environment or business, individual businesses. Purely money to be made, brokers to make fortunes, and here we go again.
But again, if you look at the whole climate change debate, a large element of it is one of control and centralisation. There's no argument that there has been global warming. What you have to come back to, and there was a very interesting letter which some of you might have seen, written and was signed by 100 scientists, some climatologists and others. Some of it has been passed around by email quite a bit, who are in fact saying that a lot of the carbon emission controlling that they're doing is actually a bit more dangerous than the so-called carbon emissions. And now we're all against pollution, but this is, taking it totally in the wrong direction. And in fact, as I said in this particular argument by the scientists in this letter, the carbon, the CO2 emissions are needed for the plant life anyway, as part of it. And same as we should look at how we live and work with the natural situation of climate change, but the human effect upon it is very minimal.
Could I come back, or move sideways perhaps, to this question of control, to allow all these things to take place? The essential point about socialism, Fabian socialism, international socialism, it is just that. It is a universal state. Nicholas Murray Butler makes that fairly plain, I think. And this is the agenda. It's no longer in this country your honest Labour trade union MP fighting for the rights of the lower classes and that sort of business. It is socialism is on a totally different plane. Fabianism is what it's all about. Now, a lot of us certainly know, you know, Donald, about the address by Toynbee in 1931 in Denmark. In effect, it is saying, and I think I put it in that notes on communist councils, the gradual destruction of the nation state of national identity by stealth. It's an obstruction, clearly, to the socialist agenda of internationalization. And Toynbee at the time was, I think, he had a position of some sort with the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House.
Director.
So there's an interesting link. Thank you.
And previously having been Director of Research at the Foreign Office as well.
Yeah. Now, you have the situation now where this is exactly what they're doing. They're dismantling the barriers. Immigration, the destruction of our national culture, national identity. You're back to Marx, you're back to the Illuminati. These are the objectives. Destroy what we did at the Frankfurt School. This is what they're working for. And the people in positions of power now are passing legislation which allow this exactly to happen. Nobody is attempting to stop it. So how does one stop it? How does one expose it for what it is?
Well, this is where you've got to get past the different people are at different levels of understanding, and this is where you have to, in my view, you have to find techniques where you get into work the way the person you're wanting to understand what's going on, the way they think, so that you can then lay the facts before them and hope that they will then pass it on. Groups like this, if you had 1,000 such groups, what are we, 20 in here in the room today? Let's say 20, probably 16, not 16 or whatever, but I'll make it 20 for round figures. But if you had 1,000 of these around the country in homes, you've then got the nucleus of what one can only say a counter-attack to the destruction which is going on, including what Brian has been referring to, both common purpose and the European Union as an aspect of the destruction.
What's needed is education as opposed to mass media, and this is where Brian is coming in with his newspaper. The more that sort of material is distributed amongst the population, the better. There could be a chemical change within the population, changing perceptions as to what's happening. You're only getting one message, one total message in the media as a total.
But I mean, can I ask the question round in this audience? Do you or do you not find, when you are talking to people generally on issues, that most people that you speak to feel that there is something wrong? Something's gone wrong. They can't necessarily put their finger on it, but something is rotten in the state of Denmark, as the expression is. They know it, they feel it. Some of them then run away from it. They don't know what to do about it.
It's in their essence. It's in their essence and the core of their being.
They're conditioned to it.
So I kind of like he who controls he who controls the past controls the present. Now, on the table in there, and another prophetic event of my life is a Bilderberg report on the Bilderberg meeting in Canada in 1968 or 69. Now, in that is debated or tabled the rising strength of multinational corporations to the extent they will be stronger than individual nations. Now that was known then, and it was tabled by the power brokers who attended the conferences. Now the Multilateral Agreement on Investment, MAI, about 5 years ago we were up to. And this, in effect, would have given multinational corporations power over national governments. Shall we say, stretching a point, if Toyota or Walmart had wanted to build an installation on Trafalgar Square, there was nothing the government could have done to stop it. They conceded power on that scale, effectively. Now we've seen it happen with planning regulations being increasingly tilted in favour of the large corporations. They can eat local authorities for breakfast to no calibre to combat that. Now, we're stuck with it. Now, this government, I'm talking about 10 years of socialist, Fabian socialist government, this government was past this, just as it sold out to Monsanto. It was prepared to back this. And it was only the French that scuppered it. This is where there is a spirit in France, like José Bové, the farmer, burning down McDonald's. They do take to the streets. But our government betrayed us, and there was very little debate about this. Now, there is a Royal Institute of International Affairs report on it. It is very interesting. Now, it goes into the whole process that created and lost the MAI, but it's in a rather rueful sense. It's really sort of saying, well, all the pros and cons, mostly pros, but we lost out, but there'll be another day. It's there. So if you link this together, you see the other side of power, from the deliberate destruction of the nation state by destroying the culture. Here is this is Nicholas Murray Butler all over again.
Tesco, what's Tesco got to do with this? Because they are taking over every corner shop.
It's taking over the food supply, isn't it?
Well, that's the
all their car parks are Euro car parks. If you
Anybody else
look
like
at the signs.
Anybody else like anything to drink refreshment? Fruit juice, coffee, tea.
Fruit juice.
Yes, please.
Josh,
Yeah. Donald,
could you take orders?
You asked, well, if we took some of these messages beyond that, outside, say to the golf club or people we know, and say, this is directed to the destruction of the nation state, etc. But we actually, he's nuts. This gentleman. Or you get so far, you yourself, you feel, should I be talking like this? And my position amongst the society, I feel comfortable with up to a certain level. I said, no, I don't want to go any further. I can't go any further. Otherwise, you said, there's that Burke over there. You see, that's a practical consequence of it. It's not only in this country, by the way. I mean, I make frequent visits to Austria, and I got lots of friends in Austria. This is exactly the same there.
We're not alone in the grassroots.
No, the West is just not the nation state. I mean, all these people in power, in the way that Barry explained, they're not interested in Britain as such. They're interested in the whole world. We start with the European Union, then we'll march off to NAFTA, etc., etc.
Well, they're not interested
in
They're not interested in Britain as Britain, but they are interested in destroying Britain because they know that the principles upon which our nation is founded are one of the greatest dangers that they have, and and for that purpose we have to be removed. Because the spark which could be here could be the danger to them.
I talk about that too, because I talk about
well, there you are.
I talk in a philosophical sort of way, and I get reports that say, yes, okay, we had the 1848 revolutions, and there's liberty and equality and philosophy. They're our counterpart, they're counter-arguments, and unless they are, as we are here, because we are like British, our history is very difficult for them to interpret our history. Anyway, in a sense, it's a different sort of history they have.
Well, they don't think the same way as we do.
No, they don't. And that's another barrier.
I've been following things written by Lyndon LaRouche and go onto his website sometimes. I don't know if anyone's followed him very much. But he's a gentleman, I don't know how old he is, he must be getting on for 80, isn't he, Barry?
He must be around that way, yeah.
And he's an American man, he's very well educated, he's got classical education. I think he stood for president as a sort of several times, but obviously he didn't stand a chance. But he's, in everything he writes, he talks about the Anglo-Dutch financial slime mould. That's his word that he always uses. And for far as he's concerned, Britain is poison for the United States and its constitution. He's writing obviously from his point of view. But really, there's an interesting thing here, because we're not us in this room here. We're not poison to the United States Constitution. I would guess that most of us are pretty sympathetic to the elements, to their their constitution and their revolution they had and so forth. But he talks about the financial system that is installed here.
Can you just hold it a second?
You're on. Like a BBC announcer. Off you go, Glenn.
Similar to what your experience. We had an experience. We tried to use, without intention, we tried to use, as members of the civic society here, we tried to question the unitary government. And at one stage, the chairman conducted the meeting pretty well, and Shevlin, the chief executive, was pretty convincing. But at one stage, they said about 2 or 3 years the council tax in the new unitary authority area wouldn't. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Do you remember my question? I said, very much like you asked, well, how do you substantiate that statement? At that stage, they had to get a woman on there, and she came, and very poorly presented. She tried similar to you, and in the end, we realised we were a dead duck. I mean, there was no way in which it could produce, no possible justification for stating it, because
anyway. But you couldn't get presumably you couldn't get your viewpoint through this organisation.
No. She spoke about 10 minutes about finance.
Can I just sort of interject with another thought? I don't sort of put it on too much of a sort of arcane sort of level, but what you've been talking about, communism isn't dead. It died in the Soviet Union. Soviet communism died. Socialism we're talking about, this conterminous relationship, but the technicalities of applying it were worked out to a fine art in the Soviet Union. What you have is the ideological struggle and the arms struggle, and they're interrelated and complementary. Now, when the arms struggle fails, you implement the ideological struggle, and I suspect that behind the IRA are the Marxist elements who have been applying this, and we simply haven't understood what they've been doing. When they've had a truce, it's only because shooting and bombing hasn't worked. The moment there's a truce, we think there's peace coming. They turn to the ideological struggle. Now, you're looking at this attack on society in its various dimensions on this basis. It's a highly scientifically developed sort of approach, Soviet politico-military doctrine. And this is, I think, is what we're witnessing in socialist terms, because anything which is, it's all left-wing, if you like to use that cachet, which is not an accurate one, but the left-wing is never attacked and debased. It's always right-wing, hard right, neo-fascist, extreme right, BNP a target, a sitting target. And you look at some of the stuff they produce, it's traditional conservatism, a la Lord Tebbit. Now, what is happening is only one side. There's no, the centre has shifted, the goalpost has shifted as far as I can see. But the way we've allowed it to happen over the years, and I was saying this last night, we have in this country, again, while we were in Germany facing the Warsaw Pact, we had a Marxist Don, Erich Hobsbawm, and there was another one as well, in our universities. And we might as well have put a KGB general in as a chief constable somewhere, or a Metropolitan Police Commissioner. It's the same principle, exactly the same. We have been sitting ducks for this. And if you look at communism, this is how it works. This is how they're trained to work. You look at Arthur Scargill. I mean, maybe he did have a case of the miners. It's a very convoluted thing, this question of the miners' strike and the reasons for it. He's been proved right in many ways, because he's gone international and we bought coal from outside and closed our own mines, just like our milk production, a lot of the other food production. But you see, there is the principle, and this is how they operate. You know, unless we understand how it's operating, because the socialists are working in much the same way. Where do we go? We've yet to get to the arms struggle, because nobody's actually got on the streets and openly rebelled in a serious way. Sorry.
Yeah, Brian, you were saying you noted down the elements of the attack on society, many of them, and then you with your military mind, which is a good thing that we've got some military people, you said, well, you've got to formulate your counter attack on these different things, these different elements that are being attacked. Okay, so that sounds, and you said it's got to come from the bottom as well. That makes pretty good sense to me. Yeah. So in other words, that says to me that different people have got to, if you like, specialise on a bit of the counter attack. So like for example, me, I might like here's a bit in my local rag here. Like, posters focus on homophobia. This is Stone Wall, and they put some great big hoardings up in Luton with their attack on homophobia. You see, so maybe it could be me that has to be doing something to counter attack there. But that would what you said is right. But that obviously, if you were doing that on a grand scale, that would mean that all over the country there would be all the little soldiers in of our persuasion, who would all be doing their little bit, attacking and specialising on their particular bit of the attack. There'd be somebody, for example, at the primary care trust, and sit there in this horrible, boring meeting, but they'd have their say, and then they'd write to the paper and say what they said, and say what happened in the meeting and what they'd said, and all those different elements. But of course that requires organisation, does it not?
Yeah.
So I mean, we've got, for example, we got the campaign for an independent Britain, and we've got the democracy movement, and we've got the Freedom Association. We've got various organisations, but if you're going to attack, like, according to Brian's idea, now there has to be some organisation. Now that sounds good to me, but at the same time as that, I'm always afraid there that once you've got an organisation that is organising, if you like, like the command of the counter attack. I'm always afraid of the fact that itself could be infiltrated.
Absolutely, and that's why you do the next standard military procedure, which is that when they're amongst you, you've got to also organise yourself as a guerrilla army. You do not stay utilising a pyramid structure, because that's the bit that gets infiltrated and messed up.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is effectively you treat all the little cells out there as little potential units in our army, and you give them what they need. Two secs. You give them knowledge and understanding, yeah, because that is what they need, and you give them weapons which are procedures that we or other people already know work, but you say to them, here's your supplies, here's your ammunition, you know what your area is, you've got local knowledge, you know who the people are, and then you let them fight it in their area. Okay? All they need to know is that when they run short of supplies, they can pick up a phone to somebody and say, we actually need 20,000 sheets photocopied and we haven't got the resources, can somebody else do it? And you provide that for them. But the other thing you do is you do not build this party control structure. You build something that's very flat and gentle.
Grassroots.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting because Fern was talking about sustainable development a little while ago, and I got the booklets from and I think some of the people in this room have seen them, from Freedom 21 Santa Cruz in California. And they made a decision, actually, I don't know when it was, about 18 months ago. They said, instead of trying to be a sort of a nationwide body fighting the political concept of sustainable development, they would go back down to the grassroots and fight it on their. So they deliberately changed their whole organisation around to fight it on their own local level. They still put their website out and they still tell you what the sort of things that are going on, but they went down to a low level.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here's another suggestion, and it comes from you, Barry, really. I'm very surprised you're not mentioning it. And talking about university, there's no department there's no faculty, as far as I dealing with monetary reform, or more acceptable probably, the type would be monetarism. I don't know of any university that I mean, I may be wrong, probably I'm wrong.
Well, where in the pyramid,
Economics would be.
in the power pyramid, where do universities come?
Pretty high.
Well, the university, I suppose, in the old-fashioned term, is the pursuit of truth.
No. Where in the social power pyramid, if we've got politicians and the Queen right up at the top, where do universities come?
Well, if you're talking about something like monetarism or monetary reform, I would think it will. Well,
They're at the top and the bottom, they're everywhere.
Can I chuck in an idea here? Donald's looking so he's about to pounce.
That's all that.
And this is what I put to you, as you know, in the past. I used to go along to the annual meetings, the 3-day conferences of the Bronze Grove Group for Monetary and Economic Reform. Now, there's a great deal of knowledge there. It is really high quality knowledge. I decided that the potential was there to put the boot in on money matters in a simple way. I think partly a matter of resources, partly a matter of fragmented sort of approaches to these things. I stopped going because I decided that it was a talk shop. Now it's a pity because I think on economic issues where things are going sadly wrong in this country, a bombardment of letters signed by, say, a half a dozen or more members of the group could be effective. Now, it hasn't come to pass. I mean, I said that, for me, agreeing in principle, no people have got identical approaches or ideas, agreeing in principle, my signature was up there, and whoever drafted the letters would be free to use my signature, provided I didn't want to see the draft of the letter, it was sent to the press, but as long as I got a copy of it, so I knew what I subscribed to. Now, you can, I believe, under the right sort of heading in the newspapers, bombard the press with the truth. Now, when Dr. Arpad Pustai was rubbished over this question of the institute in Edinburgh, the Roslin Institute, I think it was. Rowett Institute, yeah. When he was rubbished for his discovery that GM potato caused cancers in rats, a letter appeared under about 10 signatures. Very impressive, in the Telegraph, no doubt in the Times, rubbishing this man. Now, I checked up on the signatories. One was a Sir somebody. It's always handy having Sir somebody or some sort of title in your signature block. In Who's Who, I found that one had no qualifications at all listed. Only 3 had qualifications, scientific or medical qualifications, remotely associated with Pustai's discipline. But the point was, the letter was there to do the damage. I'm not suggesting anybody else should work on that basis, but you can use this approach, and you get in the Times if you've got an impressive enough heading. Any defence of Israel or any defence of Palestine and the Palestinians, you will get a number of signatures to letters that appear in the Guardian, where I see them for the most part. Defence cuts and things going wrong, you'll get half a dozen signatures on the big letters. This is one way to go, and I mean, in terms of your idea, Margaret, is if you've got a group who are prepared to bombard the local press, not just with one signature, but several people subscribing to what the point you want to make. But it's still small beer. It's on a fragmented and very limited scale. And there's a lot to be said if one in any particular area, I think it's Shropshire in my case, where enough people could operate in this way, you could bombard your local press with letters on these issues of local concern, and you just keep doing it until the dam breaks. And I mean, there's been a case where the local editor was particularly biased and in bed with the council, according to the evidence and what I was told. So a way was found to the board of directors of the newspaper group. And that cured it belatedly. But the point was, that is one method of attack. You go for the jugular. If you're blocked, and we know the press is controlled, but not so much the local press, not entirely, then you find out who the board of directors are that owns the paper, and you go straight to them. And it's always a good point, if you're writing letters of this sort, to copy it to other agencies. They won't want to know. When I fell out with British Telecom in a big way 8 years ago, I was so angry, and they bugged me about it unmercifully. I wrote a letter to Sir Ian Vallance, who was the chief executive. I told him that with a long experience of organisation and management, I discovered another management principle, management by evasion. And I copied it to the editors of the three business papers, you know, sort of, the late was Observer, Times and Telegraph, weekend papers. And did it hit the fan? I had all sorts of suits on the phone to me very quickly. But you see, it can be done. Now this is one weapon, you know, that one can consider. But
how do you make it bigger? Was your question? Yeah?
Well, no. How do you apply the principle? Is it possible? Is it possible in any one area to tackle these issues we're talking about, or a selected issue?
Yeah, because we've got an absolutely huge army out there. I'm going to stick with Donald's figure. You're telling me there's still 20,000 members in UKIP. And I'm going to say to you, you probably hate me, as far as I can see, they're doing nothing. They're asleep. And the reason they're doing nothing is because they haven't been given anything to do. And what they have been given to do, when they do it, they don't get a result. My challenge is, if you give these people something simple to do, and they do it, and they get a positive result, they will come back clamouring for more. So you've got 20,000. At the moment, I can't tell you how many we've got loosely in our organisation, but I think people on the ground in the UK, we're already getting to 2,000 of them. That's how many I think we're talking about. Okay, and from a small office, and John's visited, and it's the size of the loo, more or less, with one telephone, we cannot cope with the telephone calls coming in.
Brian.
Yeah.
Your paper, the UK column.
Well, I'm getting there.
Oh, right.
What are we doing that is producing the telephone ringing? What are we doing? No, in the first instance, it's not the newspaper. We're doing something very simple. We are telling people the truth about how bad it is in the country. And when I talk to people, and that's where we started yesterday, I say to them, the country is being attacked, people are dying, and more people are going to die.
You don't have to use bullets and guns. No,
it's being done a different way. But we tell people the truth. We tell people the truth when we stand up in front of them for a talk. We tell the truth in the paper. We tell the truth on CDs. We tell the truth when the telephone calls come in. And the telephone calls keep coming in. And we're now getting calls from young people. A guy called me the other day, 25 years old, said, I've seen one of the papers. I can see what's happening. My brother can't see what's happening. What can I do? He asked me what he could do.
Can I check? Sorry.
I'm going to keep ramming the point. I'm sorry. You are chair and it's your house.
Chairman, not chair. That's
yes. Here, here.
I'm talking about competency.
You've been brainwashed.
When you do simple things, you get a result. People tell you if you do that it doesn't work, and I say, on the contrary, not only does it works on a scale we can't cope with it. Now, dear old UKIP, I attended a UKIP meeting in Bournemouth, and in the morning, a little while ago, in the morning, the meeting was getting close to discussing what was happening in UK. It was starting to talk about real problems and stuff. And then we had lunch, and then after lunch, my goodness, it was all nasal gazing. It was all to do with the NEC and can we elect somebody. So what happened was 120 people were drifted off the serious situation in the country to nasal gazing about NEC meetings. And I wanted to cry, because if, I'll say we, but I was a guest, so I had to be quite well behaved. If we had said, right, this is the problem, this is what we're going to do, you would have got people coming to do things. Yeah?
List, wasn't it?
And my challenge, and I'll put a case of good wine on it, is that if we start to tell people the truth, get the little groups joined up, I don't want them to join an organisation, you don't need to, you talk to them as human beings. I don't care whether they're old Labour, Conservative, UKIP, BNP, Muslim, I don't care. Are they good people? If they are, I'll deal with them. And if we talk to them in this way, you will find that that army assembles itself, I'm going to say, in 3 months. I'm not interested in the Lisbon Treaty, it's illegal, it doesn't matter whether it's signed or whatever in Parliament, it doesn't matter, it's illegal, it will be struck down. But you want an army, we can put one together.
At local government level, if I can raise it in Australia, I think it's the same you said, Donald. Fascinating. They were fed up with the local council in this borough or town. So they wrote to all their sitting councillors, the long servers, putting to them a list of things that they wished them to tackle. And they got a variation in replies, some none at all, some more or less mind your own business and that sort of thing. They were almost entirely negative. So what they did, they rented a page in the local paper and put the replies, listed the replies, and they were all voted out. I mean, that's a sort of short version of the story. Again, it's just something that was done in Australia.
Yeah, it's been historically done in this country too. I mean, one particular issue, and Jane will remember this, is in Andover, just on the subject of fluoridation.
Yep.
Over a period of 9 years, they changed the whole council, because that was when it was a third.
3 years then, because the council were elected every year then.
Oh, every year, 3 years.
Yeah, well in May 2007, by producing one newspaper in Plymouth, we removed the Labour Council from power.
Well, precisely.
Yeah,
that's
right. Now, where did that newspaper come from? It came from a wing and a prayer. It came from a few £100. And 10,000 newspapers on the street changed the course of the election. We know this is true because we know that in Labour meetings after the elections, because we have our moles, they were so stunned and people were saying, what can we do about this effing little newspaper? Yeah? Now, we are beginning to laugh because when the next set of elections come up, if we wanted to, we could put 100,000 papers on Plymouth streets. And they know it, and they're very worried about it. Except we've now got a corrupt Tory government, or group in power.
Could I hold it there? Don't answer if you don't want to, Ken. But you're one of the younger members. We know each other well. Have you got any comments on the morning's discussion?
About what aspect? I mean,
any comments you feel you'd like to make, having listened to the discussion?
Going back to how can we do something about it, I like the idea of starting out small, and you've got to educate people first. And a lot of people will look at you blankly, especially young people, because they don't want to know, and they just haven't got the intellect to deal with it. But there are a certain few people which you can talk to, and I think it's a case of getting through to those and educating those people, and then it will spread a little bit more, piece by piece. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think education on a small scale is the key, really.
Thank you.
Ken, what would you say, how would you rate the importance of, for example, the internet and the computer in reaching the kind of people that you're talking about?
Massive.
Yeah.
I think that would have a great impact. I mean, obviously all young people are on the internet these days, and that's the place to be.
Yeah.
That's the thing that is vital, basically. Yeah.
I think I see some towns have got what they call an indie media, where
a what?
On the computer, on the internet, indie media, independent media. It's limited to the number of towns that have got it. For example, Oxford and Cambridge have got it, and I think
Brentford.
Brighton has got it. And
Brentford's got one.
yeah, there's a few. Maybe you could count them on the fingers of both hands. But I would like to see that expanding out to other towns and even smaller towns.
Yeah, I've not actually heard of that.
Intermediate. You sometimes see the sort of things that we talk about.
Yeah.
You'll sometimes see articles along the vein of the subjects that we talk about. You'll sometimes see them on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd like to see more of that. For example, and blog spots as blogs as well.
That's very good.
Because you can get into a blog spot with very little resources.
Yeah, it's actually free to set up.
Like you remember the Coppers blog, the famous the Coppers blog. Yeah, whereas an ordinary policeman did his blog spot, didn't he? And they've unmasked him now. But for several years he was telling the world about what happened in the police station and his daily life as a police constable. They've unmasked him now, but there's all sorts of other blogs. There's the Chief Inspector's blog and the I suppose it must be the Colonel's blog and every other.
You'd have to help him. Nick or not?
No, he's still going. They didn't boot him out, but he was unmasked. Yeah, so I think that stuff is pretty important. Well, obviously you agree that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I want to go out and see the real chairman to see what food stakes are. I think Brian's contribution is tremendously important, and it's interesting because Donald and Brian, I know, have talked at some length, and I'm sure there's a lot of mileage there. Donald can give you a hell of a time because he's given me a hell of a time for years. Devil's advocate he plays to perfection. And you don't even realise he's doing it until it's too late and he's trapped you. But Fern and Robert and Alan and I had to go in there to do a bit of filming on this book. So if we go in there while you're going in for SCOF, then people, normally so they get together in small.
Doing it. If I'm
We're now, I think, in the sort of last phase after lunch and some fairly hectic activity. Really, the wash-up period. Now, I spent a long time in the study being interviewed about this book. Did anybody come up with any revolutionary ideas while we were busy in the study? Anybody have any sort of input or suggestions?
I did hear a comment from a gentleman on my left who was really surprised that all this has been going on and he hasn't known anything about it all these years.
Yeah.
All these years.
Mm.
I mean,
Join the queue.
What?
Join the queue.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, at my age, I mean, this young man sitting next to me at 27, that's really my age, this ignorance doesn't matter, but it matters a lot to him. Anyway, fair enough. But I'm surprised that I thought of myself as being a reasonably well clued up, well read, whatever it is. And I knew about what goings on, saying most public and some private institutions. I know what goes on in the American political system, with the British political system, etc., etc. And here I am, being told by Brian and so forth, and the people around me, of the things I haven't a clue on. I mean, I read about it. And when I see something like child abuse or whatever, or a murder, and I say to myself, I'm not interested in that. It's almost like saying there's tittle tattle. My wife would go through it and say, "Would you tell me all about it?" I said, "Well, I'm not interested in it. I'm interested in the way that the country is run, if you like." And then to be told this, I mean, I am most depressed.
Well, yes, I'm sure you have every reason to be. I mean, we are simply not told. And a lot is going on behind the scenes that we're never told about. The paedophile affair and things like that. I mean, you've only got the Kincora Boys' School in Northern Ireland, the stitching up of Colin Wallace, who got too closely involved with the truth. This has taken place, and it reaches into very high places. I mean, LaRouche, for all his faults, Lyndon LaRouche in the United States, has put a finger on this in the United States. It is a really big thing, and you really have this counterbalance of evil, the plus and minus, the polarity of evil. I was talking to somebody about a woman in Hull I knew vaguely, and she was chasing up the abuse of children. She had a lot of support from the local authority, a lot of support from the police and so on. The moment she mentioned Satanism, the shutters came down and the cooperation finished. And there has to be a message here. I mean, I firmly believe in this, you know, equal and opposite polarity. And you're not going to be allowed to know. It's there, and I think there's sufficient evidence. But you see, when it reaches into high places and right to the top, how deeply is the rot embedded and how widespread is it?
Well, isn't Satanism allowed on Royal Navy ships now?
Yes, it is.
Well, this is part of your ideological struggle, political correctness, the meltdown precipitated by the Frankfurt School to destroy religion. I mean, 10, 20 years ago, it would have been utterly unthinkable. Anybody who suggested Satanism was valid on a Royal Naval ship or any military establishment of any sort would have been marched away by men in white coats. Now it's valid, and these encroachments have been taking place the whole time under our noses, and with the full knowledge of the establishment, whatever part of the establishment you talk about, with government. I mean, I can remember about the first cuttings I began to collect when I got involved in this whole thing. In about 1985, there was horror expressed in the House of Commons about the proposal that Channel 4 should dare to have a late night programme, I think 1 hour, devoted to homosexuality. And look at it now, it's almost compulsory. It's leached into the system with the full knowledge of all the issues involved. Now, one has to sort of understand suddenly the whole spectrum of that particular aspect of life. It's not a straightforward black and white sort of situation. It's different people in different ways. But nevertheless, basically, to make it mandatory teaching in schools and so on, to bring the awareness to young people who are not ready for it, is a deliberate destruction of molarity. It's destabilizing society. And it's happening because those who know it's happening intend it to happen, and it must be for a purpose. It's not simple equal opportunities, as it were, equal treatment, equal rights, human rights, call it what you will. It's deliberately implemented, I think, to destabilize society. And you can apply that to many, many things. So where do we go from there? It's yet another avenue that one can go down in much the same general field as we've been discussing.
Well, Brian's got the whole list of categories, the various aspects, which is various things occupied by the enemy, in the church, in the schools, or whatever. Is it not possible to write an instructional leaflet in each about and tell the lay person what to do about it?
Well, somebody will have to produce it.
Right. I mean, that'd be quite a lot of research will need to be done.
Yeah, you see,
to get to the necessary detail.
Yeah, I don't want to be negative. This sort of thing, the infiltration of the church, trade unions, feminism that uses a weapon quite deliberately, and to destroy the Christian church in its extreme sense. I was writing about under my mentor as part of the ideological struggle in the early 90s, well, no, in the 1980s, late 1980s, and I've still got the material now. This is nothing new, but it's achieved a sort of, as it were, a public prominence. It's in the public domain. It was happening then, but of course, people didn't know about it. They weren't talking about it. The more aware we become, the more we realise it's been taking place over a long period, and it's with us now. Now you have common purpose and another form of slavery, mental slavery in a way. You see, you're faced with this, and the problem, of course, is getting the message across in some way, doing something about it.
Well, when you come to the, say, the workforce, the people at the coalface in the system, which I've been through, then you're just slaving away all the time, and you're isolated. You're up against the management. If you've got wives and children, they'll expect more and more work out of you, and you have to provide it. And if you don't do it, and often do it for free, then somebody else will. And so we've got to a situation where a man now has less than 10 minutes per day with his children. I mean, he's got no energy left to fight the system.
And the mothers.
He's exhausted.
And the mothers.
Well, I mean, this again has an economic basis, I suspect, in that aspiration for a better material life, house ownership, to own a motor car, has evolved with the pressure on women to work. It began as rights. A woman had a right to work. Well, if she was in a position to do so, that was her right. But everybody demanded the same rights because, you know, it was maintaining the prosperity in any particular social class or neighbourhood on an even keel. Those with children went out to work, and of course it had its impact on the family. Then it became essential to pay for debt, not least mortgage debt, and there was no alternative for the wife to work. And we're in the situation that's been well publicised now. That's certainly happened, and one has to say, in a society where industry has been streamlined as shed labour, where's that labour going? Do we need to put people under such enormous pressure to work? Of course, we had the question of cutting labour costs and that sort of thing. And a friend of mine said, well, that's a government problem. What do we do with the surplus labour? But the fact remains that people are under enormous pressure to work. When there's no need, there's ample resource in human terms to function under less pressure.
Well, most of these people, the surplus people, have been absorbed into the public sector, haven't they? Where they're doing the sort of politically correct jobs, non-jobs.
Yes, what do you mean, the privatisation game?
No, I mean that the Labour government have increased the public sector workforce.
Well, I mean, yes, so there's a bureaucracy which I'm sure, if you look at it, is created to absorb the surplus labour. It has to be used somewhere, unless you're going to cull it.
And all these people, of course, will be voting Labour, aren't they? Well, most of them.
It's a moot point, but I mean, it's an option, yeah. But did anybody come up with any suggestions about how to penetrate this problem?
Well, we did really, because we've got all the points that people have raised. Would it be helpful if I recapped on those?
Yeah.
So, if we just do the main suggestions that came out, we had visiting the MPs and the MEPs in order to really spell out to them what was happening and what was expected of them. So that was put forward by yourself. We had decentralisation of power. We know the other side is trying to centralise everything, so we should be looking at ways where we can actually bring the power back to ordinary people. And maybe that ties in with the third one, because we identified that local government was actually very important, and that if people could be dealing properly with their local councillors, their local city councillors or their district councillors, those are the people who should be actually putting the pressure on the members of parliament.
Could and should.
And it was suggested that we ought to be at the stage where local councillors could summon their MP or MEP in order to read them the Riot Act as to what was going on and what was expected of them. Right, we also came up with the fact that we should carry out a campaign of letters. Now, this one interested me a lot because we were talking about a bombardment of letters to people. And we know that the European movement was spending huge sums of money on groups of people to write letters supporting Britain's entry into the European Union. So what we're really doing is using their tactics back on them. But if we could produce a team of, I'll suggest, 1,000 people who are prepared to write a letter a week, those could be very useful letters directed in a few key areas.
Could you get volunteers through your UK column paper?
We should be encouraging them to join the initiative. They haven't got to join a club, they haven't got to sign anything. We simply say, look, if you'll help, this will work. And I think we are easily capable of getting 1,000 people very quickly. Imagine if we had 200,000 people starting to write letters. We could bring the MPs to their needs.
Could somebody draft a letter so that, I mean, it's the physical action of getting it all out. We can do the getting them out. If somebody could draft perhaps a letter for us all to send out.
Well, that's true. Probably we could take it a step further and say that within the group we know we've got specialist people in different areas. We've got constitutional specialists, we've got NHS specialists, we've got police people, and what we should do is identify those people and get the specialists to write the letters, the draft template letter. But I think
there is a principle here, again, I reiterate, because I've used it more than once. Copy it to other agencies who they would not wish to be aware of it, who may be able to make life uncomfortable for them. It's got to be used tactically and sensibly. You don't want to attack somebody before you're sure it's worth doing that. When Jack Cunningham, the enforcer, was the first agriculture minister, and he was being a bit of a heel to farmers, and our local farmers got involved in a crowd in London when one of them jumped on his car. I was talking to this farmer's wife in the farmer's market one day and telling her about it. She said, that was my husband. Now I discovered that Cunningham had connections with I think it was the nuclear or chemical industry, I think, which really compromised his position. And I wrote to the Prime Minister in person, getting the title, initials and address absolutely spot on, the way to write to a Prime Minister, copied it to the ecologist. And I got a very quick reply, may we use your letter, from the ecologist. And I was on the point of sending back and saying yes, by all means. In fact, I think I may have done, but only too late, because within a week or two Cunningham was out, he'd resigned. Now, whether that, I mean, it adds up, circumstantially it adds up, but one should consider this. But you see, the question is, on which subjects would you compile a letter, and what signatures? It would be take a lot of organising. Somebody would have quite a job, because if you were going to, say, collect 100 signatures, from where? Your own locality, across the spectrum of our own contacts, on what subject? It would take a lot of organising. It would be quite a problem. Somebody has got to take this on if it's going to be done. Unless each individual goes away with the knowledge that they locally, amongst their contacts, possibly like Margaret, can get people together to do this. But to be effective, it has got to be a barrage of letters, and you have to keep it up. It's rather like protests on the streets. Politicians know only damn well that with a big weekend protest like the protest against the Iraq invasion, the public have to go back to work on Monday morning for the most part. It takes the heat out of the thing. It's got to be sustained. It can't be left to weekend activities effectively. And the authorities or the target the target authorities, shall we say, have got to be damn well aware that they can't relax on a Monday, that the attack will go on.
Just as an aside, my cousin's wife was Jack Cunningham's secretary because he was a relation of hers.
I thought you were about to add to what I said. Well, that's interesting.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What's about,
Yeah.
I know what you're thinking.
Go on, Ryan.
I said, what about campaigning for a vote strike? Nobody votes in any election. Bring the whole system down into disrepute.
This sort of thing has been tried, but you're talking about millions of people with the vote, and how can you convince them to withdraw the vote? It doesn't happen. It's not in human nature. It would be extraordinarily difficult to achieve.
I think that's what they've been doing, Barry. We keep getting accused of apathy, but I think that's what people have been doing.
Yes, but
abstaining from voting in large numbers.
You see, say take North Shropshire. Let us guess at a constituency with 50,000 votes. If the an election finished up with perhaps 10,000, 5 or 10,000 people casting votes and the rest marching with their feet, then they would get worried. But it's very difficult, I suspect, to identify a viable percentage who will vote with their feet and have any impact. It's easy. People are like sheep. Bertrand Russell's Nation of Sheep won't happen. Like people who vote automatically with the party their fathers voted for, or in accordance with what they perceive as related to their own particular social class. I mean, this has gone on time immemorial. The two major parties, plus the Liberal Democrats, I suppose, thrown in for good measure. But you see, it goes on election after election in exactly the same way. And this is what you've got to, one of the things you've got to challenge in some way to upset that balance.
Could it be that by not voting you actually disenfranchise yourself, because eventually they'll say, well, if nobody's interested or wants to vote, then we'll make all the decisions. They're not interested.
Well, it's happening now, except for the fact we do vote and they take no notice, anyway.
Yeah.
There's not going to make any difference. There is no democracy, in truth. It's a paper transaction.
A question does remain, which troubles me now. It's troubling me more and more as this discussion goes on. We're talking about the willful, almost the willful destruction of society. Now, the next Western democratic society, if you like. The next question is, why? Who's doing this, and why are they doing it? And the next question beyond that is, having done it, what remains? Are we talking about the survival of, say, X number of millions of people enjoying huge advantages of space and wealth, and the rest being either disposed of in humane or inhumane ways? Or I mean, these are huge considerations.
Well, I mean, we query this, but say in 50 or 100 years, and things would change radically. And all the time we talk without reckoning about China. And Simon, who is it, writes in the Simon Jenkins, writing in the Guardian. He writes some very interesting stuff. I think, what was it, George Monbiot? By the by, whoever it was writing about the total change in the economic sort of balance, something we have has yet to hit us. I mean, this is what I'm saying is
that is only going on the skirt of my problem. I mean, I lived with the Chinese for some years, and I mean, he's just like Joe Bloggs. He's just like me. He thinks just like me. He wants to get on in his own little world. He wants his family, and I mean, in China, there's similar parallels.
What is it? 1.75 million of them. The 1.75 million, should we say, Joe Bloggs. It's a big multiple, compared with us. And you're talking about them enmeshed in economic power and industrial power. And we're going to look pretty pipsqueak at this rate. India as well. Now, I mean, there will be many issues behind it. Again, the globalization of power, the money system.
Let's leave that on one side. I'm still troubled by the fact that if we are aiming at the destruction of, say, Western democracy or Western society in this way, and I'm trying to go on, say, 50, 100 years ahead, and the people are left behind, the elite, if you like, got their way, well, what's the purpose of this? I mean, are they going to live as a very affluent minority?
Yeah.
Well,
that's. I think one of the key things is that the people we're up against are not like us. They are very difficult to understand because they are not like us. You are trying. You have a personality and you have a mind which believes in fairness, honesty, a moral standard or moral standards. Your whole makeup, if you're a normal human being, has these attributes.
It's almost like a knife in my heart when you say that there are people not like us.
Well, they're not.
The establishment is on a different astral plane.
If you take Stalin. Stalin was travelling around in his state train through the areas where he had murder teams murdering a set number of people a month.
Are you talking about Blair in the same way?
Well, every time we go to a dictatorship, the same people emerge. Blair hasn't got a conscience.
He does it to other people like the Iraqis.
Blair doesn't
Christian,
feel like you do about things because he's clearly lied. He's happy to send troops off on a lie over weapons of mass destruction. He's happy to take money.
But do these people think further ahead?
I think we're drifting away from the problem in that we have a situation on the ground in this country, a tangible situation within our reach. That is, to work at the grassroots, this analogy of lighting a bonfire. How do we do it? We've had letter writing.
Right. Shall I go through the rest of them and then you can...
How many more have you got?
Well, I've got 12 altogether that I've written down.
Well, you must be well through them. Okay, carry on then.
Well, the bombardment of letters was number 4. Number 5 was to give local councillors effectively a list of demands, what is expected of them, so that they know exactly what people are asking of them, and they will also be told that if they don't deliver, they will be out of their seat. So you're giving them a simple set of instructions. Number 6 was that we should put a considerable effort into educating younger people. Now, we didn't really discuss ways of doing that. That was simply a statement that we thought it was a key area.
We lost our 2 star performance, potentially star performance.
Well, we can come to others.
Give them something to think about.
Number 7, which is perhaps tied in with that, because it was also recognised that the using the web and India media websites was important for getting younger people, which Ken came up with. So younger people and using the modern system of communication, which is the internet, we've highlighted. I put one down because it was there, although we didn't quite get to it, but we can create local newspapers. And if you can do it in one area, you can do it in another area very easily. If the media doesn't print the truth, then you create your own media. And it can be done. And it can be done very cheaply. Number 9, I put down that we have got to deal in sound bites. We are trying to wake up a very large number of people. It's no good if we keep giving them mixed messages. At lunchtime, there was some cards around, and I know there was a bit of debate about what was on the card, but I think we've got to get all the groups to stick with sound bites on set topics. So if we believe the country is being destroyed, that's what we should talk about. Those are the words we use. Every time we drift off into other subjects, it starts to make it confusing for people. Yeah. Now, what the sound bites are going to be, I think we have to work on. But Barry, I thought you might like it if I said the important thing about our propaganda is we've got to stay on target. Is that reasonable?
Not about analogy, shall I call it?
Yeah. Number 10 is we tell the truth. It doesn't matter what people say to us, we're all nutcases, we're all slightly odd people, but I find the more you go around telling the truth, the better you feel about yourself. So I think we have to tell the truth, warts and all, and that is the situation is not just bad, it is dire. And when I hear people saying you can't tell people that because they're not ready for it, I think it's the most condescending statement. People need to be told. We know we can get people helping because the moment we start to network, the people are coming on board. And if we've raised 1,500 people in a little under a year without really trying, if we get 10 equivalent groups set up around the country, we're going to start to get into some big numbers very quickly. So we can do it. And the last one that I wrote down, which I'm cheating because it was something I've thought for a time, is it is possible to take power from your MPs. If you go and see your local MP, Mr. Gary Streeter is my favourite because he's done nothing so far, and you simply tell him that he's no longer the MP. It's pointless him turning up at things because we're not going to take any notice of him. Now he will laugh at that initially, but actually when you think about it, if a considerable group of people locally say their MP is not representing them, and they turn up at meetings to tell other people he's not representative, he's got a problem. You take the power away from the MPs. And that's it. So altogether we had 12 ideas for what we could be doing. And I think we're capable of putting those into practice.
Right. Well, we've got, I don't see any point in endless debate about these because people will not necessarily agree on all of them. The 12 options.
Yep.
We've got a mixture of people here, individuals with no organisation to work within or to on any scale. We've got individual I know, Donald, has been at this business infinitely longer than I have. And has enormous experience in this sort of thing. You have got an organisation which we're working, which you could button onto, but you presumably are limited with your capacity. And we've had Ken's view, which I think is absolutely important, which is why one reason one wanted the younger generation here, because those who are switched on and can grasp what we're talking about pretty quickly, then they are a great asset for the future. It's on them we should be relying in the future. But we come from different parts of the country, and we all have a place to go back to with its own problems, and it really has given us a kit of parts that we can implement according to our resources.
Yep.
And the local problem. But I mean, it's very difficult to coordinate action on one particular point simultaneously. If you're going to implement some of this stuff, it requires a lot of organisation.
See, Brian said an interesting thing. He said you've got to be on the right message, not give mixed messages. So that could be the kind of basis to work from, because if you've got your punchlines, your sound bites that you're working on as your starting point, then you can work on those in your own local area. But obviously everybody's got to know what the sound bites are, haven't they?
Yep. But I think the sound bites come out of the topics where we say people are getting at us. So I mean, one sound bite which is probably easy to do, which I think everybody would agree on, is if we know that political correctness is cultural Marxism, then it's got to be attacked as cultural Marxism. So the message is that we are suffering from the implication of or imposition of cultural Marxism, and that's what we're fighting. We call it Marxism. That makes it something rather different from the rather funny political correctness.
If I could pick that one up, because Joan and I are trustees of the Memorial Hall Trust here, which was rescued from the town council and is run by a management committee of 4 trustees. There are about 15 or 20 trustees who each represent an activity which uses the Memorial Hall, like Joan represents the Oswestry District Society of Artists. The chairman, the joint chairman, is a former mayor, borough mayor, quite a bit of experience in local government. She's no longer on the council. The vice chairman, or joint chairman, is the daughter of the late owner of the newspaper chain in Oswestry. And they persisted in using the term chair. On one occasion, talking about joint chair, I said, presumably 2 chairs makes a sofa. So it does puncture the thing. Now last year, I think it was October, they had the annual general meeting, and the secretary, who is another one involved in local government, wrote the report for the chairman, and it was full of chair and this sort of thing. And I held a hand up and I said, look, I will not be associated with anything that includes politically correct terms like chair. And
well, I personally believe the Alpha course is a form of common purpose for the churches. And if you look into the background of the Alpha course, you start to come up with some very worrying things, such as the Holy Trinity Church Brompton. Who attends it? Well, Tony Blair used to attend it. We have Mr. Nicky Gumbel. What's his background? Well, he's legal and trained in theology. But there's something not quite right about the Alpha course, and there is a group of, quite a large group now, of vicars and lay preachers who've been looking at it for some time, and they are seeing aspects of it they don't like, and I personally agree with them. I think it is a mild form of brainwashing going on in the churches. Now, whether Stephen Green understands that or not, I don't know, but I think that it would be good to at least get him in with a group where he hears some different viewpoints about what's happening at different levels. I would be delighted to talk to him about spiritual matters, and it's interesting how this group has touched on spiritual things, whether it's Satan or now we've mentioned spiritual things with Stephen Green. We need to get a grip of these things. He's perhaps leading on it, but I wonder whether he needs some reinforcement in the broader picture. So that's where I see of having a chat with him.
Well, I don't think that would do any harm. I mean, certainly you can mention your contact with myself, because I happen to be a former chairman of the National Advisory Council of the Christian Voice, as indeed Barry's been in the same position.
I'm a member of first chairman.
Yes. So that in the constitution under which they operate, I happen to have written it after a very interesting exercise when some people were going to set up groups, committees, subcommittees, and I just sat in total silence at this meeting while they were arguing furiously with one another as to how they were going to organise themselves. And finally Stephen did actually turn to me and say, well, you haven't said anything, Don, what's your views? Well, I said, I haven't said anything because I think you've demonstrated by your actions that you're going in totally the wrong direction. And I suggested then a different approach to organisation, which in fact they had finished up adopting, and it's had a few challenges and stood the test of the challenges. And that was essentially that the only reason you supported Christian Voice was essentially that you agreed with its underlying principles and statement. And if you didn't like it, you took your support and financial support elsewhere. But there was one particular person who thought he could turn around and control the activities of Stephen Green in particular. Well, he finished up going elsewhere because he had no alternative, because he couldn't.
You're right.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the main principles of Christian Voice are, please? Just very briefly, is that possible?
No, not completely. Probably, I mean, Stephen has an Anglican background, but he doesn't go to an Anglican church now.
He belongs to a different one now.
He belongs to a different one now. Basically, they would be regarded as more on the evangelical wing.
Oh, right.
I may have the objectives somewhere in the study, but I think it'd be a waste of time to sort of drag them out.
I think I would be wrong if I tried to state it without looking at it, because it's a very tightly worded thing.
Yes, and not the various factions.
And I think you'd need to look at it as it is and being accurate with respect to it.
Could I pick up one there? Christian Voice has Lord Ashbourne as patron. Now, it does appear on the note paper. Now, on a more local basis, the Board of Trustees for the Memorial Hall here, at my suggestion, invited Ian Lucas, who's the Labour MP for Wrexham, is a solicitor and was one of the original 4 trustees of the Memorial Hall, and very respected chap. He worked very hard for the hall, and he wrote back and of course he said he was delighted. I don't think they've made any capitulation of pass that message to that news, to an announcement in the local paper immediately, and got his name on the note paper. Now, it is there, and people will see the note paper and recognise it. Now, if you had a patron, maybe, you know, but I'm not suggesting you do, but, you know, you're the immediate target because you've got a newspaper and a movement. But anybody who is looking for support, firstly they've got to, in their own particular area, with their own particular groups, who they know far better than the rest of us do, they may be in a position to find some local dignitary who is prepared, if they start pushing this business, to be a patron. It's a thought.
Yeah, Brian, I once went to, I was invited to a meeting at, it was a Star Road Reformed Church, and I was absolutely astonished at what I heard there. They had a speaker who came all the way from Chorley, or Cone, Chorley I think it was, and what he told us about Europe and his support for it, against it rather, and all the things that are mentioned in the Bible was absolutely astonishing. And I get the feeling that the Reformed churches are really onto it all.
Well, personally, I think we are seeing more of that. If I just talk about, you know, Devon and Cornwall, because I know it quite well, the people who seem to be best informed are all out of the mainstream churches.
Yeah.
Many of them are the ones who've actually left all of the formal organised churches. So there's a wonderful lady called Miss Anne Whitaker who's down in Cornwall. I think she's 82, but she works with about 105 different prayer groups who are working, interceding, praying across Cornwall, and they're extremely well informed as to what's going on. If I go into my local Church of England church where I live, the congregation has no idea what's going on, and the vicar has no idea, so he can't teach them.
What about Sozo Ministries in Romsey? They seem to be very aware, don't they? Because they've taken all your newspapers.
Well, they have, and they've asked for more.
Hand them out after church.
Yeah, they've also asked if we'd like to go and meet up at some stage, so that's quite encouraging.
Well, I was going to ask you if you could come down, if I could get in touch with the leaders of the Reformed Church in Bournemouth, near on Castle Lane, because they actually contact all the other churches in Bournemouth, and the church was packed. There were over 100 people there the night I went.
Well, I still find it surprising that I did it, and I have done other ones, but I mean, I did a talk in the Baptist church down in Truro, which was about 2 years ago, and what I did is I talked on what was happening in this country, but I brought in passages from the Bible and end times prophecies, and I was amazed at the response I got from afterwards, because people came up and started to talk to me about what was happening in the country. Thank you for coming to our church and actually telling us what was happening. A very, very large man who looked like he could sort of pick up a complete farm cart in one hand sort of came and started saying to me he was very interested when I talked about the sort of dark stuff going on, and he said it's going on all over the place in Cornwall.
Please do one in our area.
Pardon?
Please do one in our area, if it's in Romsey.
Yeah. It's at the moment it's just I'm getting a bit more organised, because I've now got a diary which we're getting dates in. So in principle, yes, I've got to say people have got to cover my basic expenses for doing it. But otherwise, I'm happy. But anybody is capable of going and talking to people. What do I do that has been different? I just tell people the truth. And it works. It works every time. It works with the Muslims, it works with the BNP audience, it works with the church audience. And yes, some people are shocked at what you say. But I just tell them what I know, and what I know is true. Robert.
Brian, you said something about concentrating on decentralisation.
Yep.
I think just a little quick comment there. We've got to be careful with that we're not playing into the hands of regionalisation and the EU regionalisation, because they could easily step forward and say, oh yes, because this is what we're doing, we're decentralising.
Give you an easy one for that. If you take Cornwall, where they're working very, very hard to actually get rid of the district council in Cornwall, there is tremendous support from local people to keep the local council. But the newspapers are not reporting what people are saying. And in the council, we have now got councillors who are coming forward who are talking about a stitch-up between the Tories and the Lib Dems to ensure that legislation to create the unitary authority is passed. So it's been brilliant that we're now getting people say, come down and we'll tell you about the secret agreement between the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. And this is one of the fascinating things. You say, why are the Conservatives working with the Lib Dems to implement a European agenda? And I'm going to tease and say that is a common purpose. I'm not saying they are common purpose, but you're seeing...
So is the unitary authority not being passed in Cornwall?
Well, at the moment, it's looking like it will be passed. It's looking like it will come into existence, unless the local feeling can be pushed through.
Well, you know it's come to pass in this county, don't you?
But I think Robert is quite right. One needs to expose the false decentralisation, because there's lots of pictures related to regionalisation which is false. I mean, the whole argument which was put forward on subsidiarity within the European Union is false decentralisation. They talk in terms of that being decentralised, and ignored all the things which are centralised, apart from the fact subsidiarity only works if they agree to grant you some powers unless they want them back, which is not decentralisation. But I agree, you have to bring into the focus when you're encouraging that policy, don't be caught by the false profits of decentralisation. And you can quote subsidiarity and the centralisation with unitary authorities, taking things further away. Because at the same time as they're talking about that, they're also talking of giving more powers to parish councils than they've got at the moment, which of course is lots of towns which were borough councils before are now in Gilbertian terms reduced to the status of a parish council. But that is false decentralisation. You've got to look at the package, and the package, it's the old story, isn't it? A glass of orange juice is marvellous, but if it's got a tiny bit of prussic acid at the bottom, it's not very healthy.
Well, I reckon we're getting to the stage where we've pretty well bled the subject dry within the capacity of the day, of the weekend in fact, and the options. We can't implement anything as it stands. Brian has an organisation which is working. He's put the effort into it, he's put his neck on the line, and it appears to be coming good. Now, anybody got any last comments? Because I think it's time that people will want to sort of be getting on the road before long. Any last comments?
Well, if you could have a page of letters from your readers, like they do in Eurofax or in the other big newspapers, because I think a lot of people go to the letters right away because there are some very good opinions passed.
Yes is the answer. The only reason I didn't do it last month is because I just ran out of time to process the letters. But we We do get letters, and I've got letters. And yes is the answer.
Brian, let me ask you a question. Are you happy with what you've heard today and what you're taking away?
Yes, I am actually, because I think if we go back 2 months or something, I knew there were people up in this part of the world. It's a shame John Galloway's gone. But what we've achieved are 2 really good meetings. Well, there's been I did a meeting in Wrexham, which was an open meeting, but put together by the BMP, which seemed to have gone very well. John Galloway did one which was essentially UKIP based, and as a result of that we're already working together and swapping information, and now we've got this group. And I think the fact that we've now got Bournemouth people here in Oswestry, you know, we're getting this network working. I'm quite sure if we took some key people here and moved up to Glasgow, where we've already got people saying, will you please come and see us, we would very quickly have friends in Glasgow. Again, you know, I stress we don't need them to join an organisation. We just need people that when you pick up the phone and say, hello Anne, hello David, will you do this for us, or this is what we're seeing, they will work with you. And you want them to work with you because they enjoy working with you, because you're straight and you're honest.
Can I suggest that people always carry the UK column with them wherever they go? I know it's difficult for men because you don't have handbags and horrible bags like I've got, but wherever I go I always take some with me. As we came up at the service station, I go into the ladies' toilets and I leave them in the ladies' toilets. When I go into Sainsbury's, I always leave them in the ladies' toilets there. Wherever I go, doctor's surgery, I slip them in the magazines while I'm sitting waiting, as many as I can. Dentist as well, I always take them and leave them there. You know, there are many places where you can actually leave them for people to get hold of. Apart from the fact, folded up into a very narrow thing like that, you can actually slip them underneath the windscreen wipers of cars which are parked in all around the streets. I do usually on a Sunday afternoon I do about 200 or 300 on the West Cliff in Bournemouth, because they're all parked around the edge of the cliff, and I also stick 6 leaflets in, and if anybody wants leaflets on the Fabians, what's the other one, Common Purpose, I've got loads of leaflets which I can, Frankfurt School. And one of the things I was telling Brian was, I think that it could have been, I'm not saying it is because it might not be, but it could have been one of the leaflets that I've been putting into Brian's papers, which was, and I do all the long road that I live on, that's been picked up by the Compass magazine, which is a free magazine which lots of people get in Bournemouth, and they've actually just done an article which I did bring some, and it's got the Frankfurt School in it, and I rather think that it may not be right, but I thought that they might have picked it up from one of those leaflets. Yeah. And they've enlarged on it. They've obviously researched it and gone into it a bit more than I put into it.
When I was a young subaltern, I was going back to Portsmouth where I was based. I picked up in the Bullring in Birmingham a copy of the Communist Daily Worker. I left it anonymously on the newspaper table in the mess. That caused a bit of consternation. Donald.
Yes, I wonder just in conclusion, perhaps, if Brian could tell us a little bit about UK Column, what it is, so we have confidence, who controls it, and the such like. Because I notice you say it incorporates other named publications or publication, and it would be useful because we're obviously talking in terms of this as being the means of communication, or a means of communication.
Well, this edition, so that's February's edition, I put a little editorial inside because this was a topic beginning to come up. So whatever that is, page 8, I actually produced that little history of the column. But the start of it was about two and a half years ago, when the Devonport community in Plymouth were having a particularly rough time with the regeneration company, where large amounts of public money were going missing, And when local people started to question it, either with councillors or within the Regeneration Company board meetings or with their local MP, they were being fobbed off, rebuffed and threatened in some cases. I knew quite a bit about the community because I've been working with a couple of other people on a project there, and one evening there was a bit of discussion and we said, why don't we produce our own newspaper? The local paper wouldn't print the stories. Even when you put the evidence in front of the reporters, they would not print the stories. And the reason was that the paper is common purpose controlled. That is it. So everything is censored and you will not get stories in. So we produced the Devonport column. The we is a loose group. There was 4 of us in the beginning. One man had some sort of printing experience, so he did the initial typeset and he produced about 2 copies. Then he got too busy with his business, so I took it over and we started to print stories that the paper wouldn't produce. We funded it on donations. Most of it came out of our own pockets, and the group grew from the initial 4 to about 9 people. We then ended up with a little bit of nervousness because as we started to tackle some of the difficult issues, so the things happened, like the chief executive of the council tried to did put pressure on a councillor to try and stop the thing appearing. So we printed an article on the front page of the paper. That's the best tactic. If they attack you, you print an article on them. And after that had been going, I'll lose track now, about a year, we met a guy called David Hetherington, who ran a newspaper in London called the Westminster News. It was formerly, what was it called? It had a dragon on it. It'll come to me in a minute. And he said that basically he could help us to typeset the newspaper in a proper tabloid format. And David Noakes was there at the time. David Noakes went to work with David Hetherington. So David came back and produced the first newspaper for us. Then we got the software so that we had 2 packages, so we started to share the workload. David produced a lot of the articles, the group helped with a lot of the appearance of the paper, and then eventually I produced one, and that's how the thing has grown. But to date we've deliberately not formed an organisation, and the reason we've done this is because we've watched so many organisations form, then there's trouble on the committee, and then the thing gradually crumbles away. So we said we're not going to do that. We are just going to be a group of people who work together. Well, the change of name was quite simple. The Devonport column, in Devonport there is a column, so that's where the Devonport column came from. Interestingly enough, there is nobody on the top of the column. They never got the money for the statue, which was supposed to be a George III, I think. So it was a good name for Devonport. We then started to put it around in Plymouth, and although the 2 are joined at the hip, there's a big difference between saying you're Devonport and Plymouth. So we made it the Plymouth and Devonport column, and then ultimately we started to push them out across the country. So we had to get rid of Plymouth because that made it local. Now there was a little bit of difference of opinion. The bulk of the group felt that we'd already established the name as the column, and in fact when people phone up they talk about the columns. Can I have another 100 columns, 200 columns, where's the column? And we felt there was a brand, and if it's working, don't mess with it. And I'm not going to go into any more detail over that, but we decided to stick with the name, and I think we're right, because we've got a history. If you say where the papers come from, that's the history. Who are we? We're still a loose group of people. We run accounts. We say that anybody who wishes to see where money's coming from is very welcome to, but the donations that come in from the paper at the moment still don't pay for it. We have to work on the reserves we had initially, but luckily the income is rising, so we're hemorrhaging at a slower rate. We are definitely not funded by any political party. We're only funded by local donations.
So at the moment you're an unincorporated group, so the liability, if there were liabilities, rest with all the individuals collectively.
Yes. Now that has some dangers, but it also has some enormous strengths, because if somebody wanted to go for me and take me out, I'm pretty sure that next month there will still be the column with a new name next to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
That's fine. Yeah, I'll check with you on some of the other points on that. But
okay. But we are looking at that aspect, but what we can say at the moment is we have survived so far where other people have not survived, so perhaps we're doing something right.
Yes, but without going into it, and I'll have a chat with you before I go on that, I think you have to be prepared as you become even more effective in and exposing more. You're going to have attacks, and you probably know some of the areas which they can come from, and if you don't know them, I'll tell you afterwards, because that would take a little time on itself, because that's where you've got to, I mean, you've got a means of continuity at the moment, which is important, but you do need to keep an eye on it.
Absolutely, but I'd also say the best way of protecting this paper is if there were another 10 papers running in different areas of the country.
Well, I would agree with you with respect to that, and then you cooperate with one another and hand stories to one another, so if they knock one out, they've got another one somewhere else.
Yeah. But
you've got to build that one to a stage that it's self-sufficient in itself.
Well, that's absolutely
and then
true.
you can help another one somewhere else, and they can then help others as they come along. As long as you need the people with the necessary expertise as well, of course.
Well, we do, to which I say we do need help, because we are still very few in number, and we can do the job, but it's, you know, many hands make light work, so we're open to suggestions from people. But the biggest thing that we know is that this paper has made a major impact, and to be fair, together with the Westminster News, Capital News that was the previous paper.
That one's gone, hasn't it now?
Yeah, well, Capital News has been replaced by the Westminster News.
Oh, that's it. Capital News has gone, that's right. So, and the Westminster News is coming out once...
is also once a month.
Once a month.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the advantage of the Westminster News is it's going straight into the heart of Westminster, so it's going wallop straight into the area of the MPs.
Is it following a number of the stories that you're putting out?
Well, up until fairly recently we were sharing stories. Now I hope to still share some sort of stories, but at the moment we've just gone in slightly different directions. But there are enough stories going around, and we know we're hitting the point because the police have been visiting us trying to say that some of the stories are close to the mark, but they can't substantiate what they're saying, so they can go away. And we have an injunction where basically Plymouth City Council says we're not allowed to report on a horrific story to do with children being taken away. So that is an article in itself. But there is, I take the point about the websites. Websites, you get a lot of people going through, but what we are finding is there's something about a newspaper. Even the people delivering it say there's something satisfying about putting a newspaper through the door, which is not the same with a leaflet. Yeah.
But I think coming to the younger people, and then we'd ask Ken on this one, if in fact you take some lead articles which are on a website, you may already be doing this, I don't know, which then encourage people to lead them to the paper. Is this a way of reaching the younger person?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because obviously the links can be emailed to other people very quickly and without expense. So that would be a good idea, I think.
Have you got anybody dealing with website?
Yep, we have.
So that's already being done, in fact, then?
Well, the website for this is already set up, which is being built at the moment. I mean, it's live, but it's being built.
Right.
But the other thing is that we are almost certainly going to get closer involved with the People's United Collective website, which, if you haven't seen it, is a phenomenal website. It's talking about all the issues we're talking about, and it's got a very professional website, and it's getting a lot of hits.
So that's something that Ken can pick up on already.
Yeah.
So I just, it's a bit broken record, but just coming back, if a certain party was putting half its funds towards a quality newspaper out on the streets, these would be coming out with the millions.
So what's the circulation of this and the Westminster paper at the moment?
The Westminster News, I think, has been doing about 30,000 a month, but that is ideal for the area they're targeting. We did 100,000 of these this month and 75,000 in December. Now, if we're going to continue at 100,000 a month, we've got to work very hard on the income, and we've got to get the advertising back. We have had local people advertising in Plymouth put under pressure by the City Council. I believe that's illegal, misfeasance. But it's happened, but I think we can get the advertisers back in, and that's, you know, something that needs to be built.
Is the Westminster News gleaning more funds from the public since it's a wealthy area?
Well, the Westminster News is covering its costs at the moment by advertising, but obviously you've got London on your doorstep, so they were amused. They got a full-page advert for Mercedes, but they only put the advert in once and then they withdrew. But
they suddenly found out what they'd done.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. But it is working, and we'd certainly like to see it up to 16, 18 pages, because that gives you room for advertising and decent text for the message.
Well, I don't think you want to get too big. I think you want something which people can get through easily, and a lot of people scan, so this is where a reasonable amount of white spaces in the layout, I find, helps people to do that more easily, and they can retain it anyway.
Yeah. Well, we have had some interesting debates, because the other thing is that we know that people find it difficult to read these days. So if you look at an old newspaper from whatever it is, the 50s or the 40s, it's packed with text and you have to read it. Whereas if you look at a newspaper these days, it's effectively a comic. And so one of the things that we've tried to do, well, I think I have said it to Barry, we think that there is all the information you need out there at the moment on the enemy. We don't need any more detailed research. What we've got to do is take the research and put it into articles where it's in a simple language that people can understand. So, you know, if I talk about the On Target magazines or Sovereignty or the Portman papers, there's all these magazines which have been putting really detailed research forward, but it's been sitting on a shelf mainly, or it's been going around intellectual groups. I don't know whether you'd agree with that, but that's my feeling on it. And what we're doing is saying, let's take all of that ammunition and rework it into a male. I don't think we're quite as low as the Sun, but we're taking it somewhere in that area. Yeah, and let's tell people the truth. They won't believe it initially, but it's amazing the reaction we're getting, especially to that business. Why is nothing happening? Why is nothing working anymore? A lot of people have responded to that.
Ever thought of a page 3 picture?
Well, we have.
You as a baby we'll start with.
What?
You as a baby we'll start with.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
What about the painting that you took down off the wall?
No, I mean, we are. Well, pictures are valuable things. One of the things that some people have said to us is that we should try and get a more positive message alongside the doom and gloom, which I think is a fair comment. And
you think that's a bad comment?
No, we think it's a good comment. Yeah. Because we know this is hitting a lot of people. They're shocked, some of them, after they've read it, and so instantly they want to say, what are we doing about it?
Yes, I think you've got to come to answer that.
We think in each edition you've got to have something which is leading people along the line to solutions.
Yeah. Can we have some fun things in the mail? You've got one page, it's the letters page, I think, and there's like little one-liners, and they're really funny little comments on what's been happening, and some of them are really very funny. You know, can we have a like the odd poem in that's very patriotic? I mean, I've got one or two handy.
Well, interesting enough, this little bird, Beaky, that has adventures and things, I had to defend Beaky, but we have had people who said, where's the column, it's late, you know, where isn't it, why isn't it out, when am I getting it? And basically,
Where's Beaky?
Where's Beaky?
Yeah, it's good.
Have you thought about putting Marlborough's meeting in? Have you thought about putting especially meetings, say, in the southern part of the country, or some of the meetings, because...
Yeah, but I just say to you very gently, it's as much as we can do at the moment. Particularly, it's been very turbulent the last month and a bit.
Yes, but
it's settling down. Yeah.
Certainly Marlborough meeting.
Can we have one last point, and then we must, I think we must wind up, but I think getting to the end of the tape as well.
3 minutes.
But I think, thank you very much indeed, Brian. I knew we were going to get common purpose, and I think it's been an excellent value. We've had the opportunity to talk and take what we know away with us. Throw a bucket of cold water over that man. And you know, we've had Donald's wisdom of many, many years, and we've had Ken's view, which is essential and is stimulating certainly, and we've had Glenn, who's worldly wise, travelled the world, lived outside this bloody borough, which, you know, is so important. Get people who've been around a bit and not just insular, as one comes across so often. But thank you all very much for the input, and I hope you found it worthwhile.
And can we conclude by thanking you, Barry, and Joan, and Tim and Josh, looked after us very well, and a worthwhile gathering.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Right.